Hello and welcome to the Indo Sport podcast. Will Slattery here with you, sitting in for Joe Malloy today, and we are chatting football. I'm delighted to be joined in studio by Dan McDonnell, fresh from Abbotstown after the after the Ireland squad announcement, rather. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, good, Will. Not too bad.
Joe is absent with a voice issue. You texted me and said, I'm in a similar boat. You actually sound a lot more like yourself than you did when I saw you earlier.
Yeah, I'm trying hard here to do like sort of a podcast voice thing, but when I get into the longer sentences, they might just trade off a little bit towards the end. But yeah, there's a lot of it going around at the moment. I'm struggling.
I'm assuming your voice is hoarse from roaring at Louth and their achievement in Croke Park. Was it? I know you're a Louth football man traditionally.
You're not the first person to say that to me. And
I'd say
also,
a million people have said it.
And it's been delivered ironically in most cases. And then I try to answer sincerely and like, what? No, I actually was quite stirred by that on Sunday, I have to say. And look, it's a broader discussion, the whole sense of identity and place, and when you've lived more than half of your life somewhere else, and even like sort of growing up in Louth as a sort of a, you have to use the term football, but I still go to football as a football fan. Then you have the GA, and you would sort of be in very modest facilities, and then like the local GA clubs all have their own clubhouses, and you're like, But I would have gone to all the Louth games when I was a kid, and Croke Park in the mid-90s, there was a brawl against Laois, and I probably lost touch with it big time, and a pure bandwagon thing at the weekend. I was just like, should I be going to this game? I didn't go, but my brother went, my sister went. I was watching the match and I was like, I'm suddenly into this, and particularly because it was them, because it was me, you know.
So in 2010, would you have been up in arms?
But that was the day of the World Cup. I was at my first ever World Cup final in South Africa, which was like
so you were away.
Donica Boyle did a piece last week about how it knocked it off the news pages. Part of me was probably like going, hang on, I'm at the World Cup final here, and Louth Mead is like on our back page. What's happening? But I was fuming.
You definitely said that, by the way.
You know me. I probably did. But because I remember, like, I would have gone quite regularly up until sort of early 2000s, and there was a game against Meath where Meath screwed us, I should say, with a couple of late goals, and I was at that. I would have gone to all the games, like, but then it just drifts away. But I think it was just like it was the 68 years aspect of it, and then you just realise, God, you can lose touch and you can become detached from something. But like my next door neighbour growing up, Nicky Rowe, was on a team in 1950, 1951. The team in 1957 that won the All-Ireland, like, I'm from Ardee, and there was a real Ardee flavour to it, like Dermot O'Brien, the famous musician, Kevin Behan, the midfielder, I know his son quite well, and I would see Kevin Behan around the golf club in Ardee growing up, and these were all legends. And then you just strike, 68 years, that's a long time. And I think of, like, you know, Stephen Melia was a Louth player who was with my local club, John Mitchell's, who passed away a couple of years ago, was regarded as one of the best ever players of his generation. But because he was from Louth, that's the thing about sometimes GA for me, that like where you're born, you know, it maybe can prevent you from getting to like to get the recognition maybe. So I think it's just great now that group have got that recognition. And also, yeah, in secondary school, half my school was sort of Meath, and this was the late 90s when Meath won an All-Ireland, and like they were insufferable. As I said, there was a sort of a Liverpool-Everton thing really with the sort of Louth Meath, you know, like there's a rivalry there, but one of them is mainly winning things and the other one isn't. So I feel like this was Louth having their day, and all of a sudden I was like, yes, but I don't know if that means, I think I'd still feel a little bit guilty hopping on the bandwagon and going to games later.
Are you looking up the format of the round robin now and the preliminary quarterfinals?
I looked at it straight away.
You have a handy group.
I looked at it straight away. I'm like, yeah, that's probably doable. But no, like I have family members that do go. Maybe I'm just a bit of a fundamentalist sometimes with my sport. I sort of feel like the whole thing of, and I understand it, and it's rooted in the culture of like GA, that it might just be the 2-3 big games a season as opposed to maybe, you know, the every game. So I feel a bit guilty, but then if they sort of get a bit further down the road, I might be tempted. I should have gone on Sunday. I definitely probably regret it a little bit, but no, it's such a small county like that, but a great sporting county as well, and that is the thing. I am now going to pure like Louth mafia territory here. But you think about it, like, I know it's the wee county, but obviously population wise and sporting wise, it's got quite a lot going on. Like, it's got, you know, two clubs, mostly has two clubs in the Premier Division of a 10-team league. But you even go back to the 90s when the Irish team, like, didn't necessarily have a great geographical spread in the glory days, and obviously quite a lot of players, say, qualified through the grandparent rule. It's Steve Staunton, Gary Kelly and Ian Hart, like three sort of loud players knocking about, you know. So it's, I mean, you talk about the crowded sporting discussion in Ireland generally, in competition between sports. I mean, within Louth, like, it's a small place, but there's a lot of talented sports people there. So yeah. So am I on the bandwagon? Maybe I am.
You might get,
maybe I am.
Yeah, but you might get a day out in Croke Park yet this summer.
Who knows?
Anyway, yeah, we'll move on. The Ireland squad announcement today for those friendlies against Senegal on June 6th and Luxembourg on June 9th was announced. 24 players. Few interesting things in the squad, more so I suppose in your average squad announcement. There's 4 new faces anyway. Killian Phillips, a 23-year-old midfielder from St Mirren. He's on loan there from Crystal Palace. Josh Honohan, the Shamrock Rovers defender. Josh Keeley, the Leyton Orient goalkeeper, who's actually in action tonight, I think, against Stockport in the League One playoffs. And John Joe Patrick Finn with Stade Reims at the moment in League One, who came through the Getafe Academy. Very interesting, I suppose, backstory there as well. So they're the 4 new players. Also, the fact that he's opted basically not to pick any championship players, bar 2 guys, Jason Knight and Max O'Leary, who have been involved in Bristol City's playoff run, which is now over, and Robbie Brady, who's there kind of on a needs-must basis.
Yeah.
But certainly a new tactic. But before I get your opinion, have you heard the FAI, I suppose you call it a sizzle reel, how they kind of announced the new 4 faces?
I hear it. I saw it. I watched it without sound. Was there a bit of
sound?
Was there sound? Okay.
I'm glad you're wearing headphones. This is how the FAI kind of debuted these 4 guys.
Come on, give me devotion. Wait a minute. You got me burning.
Garson Joe Patrick gets the shot away from the frame of the goal.
Is that doing anything for you?
No, not particularly. I feel like, you know, Roy Keane or someone's like, it's Luxembourg, lads. You know.
And Shamrock Rovers are in front. Puts inside. He's hit the post of this area earlier. Still going. There's the goal. Josh Honohan refused to be denied.
Refused to be denied. So
like
if that doesn't get you excited for these friendly
40
doubleheader.
names. Yeah, look, I mean, there is good individual stories within. Like, all 4 of them have an individual, obviously, to tell, but in particular these ones, because there's such a different range of background stories. And like, I remember actually watching Killian Phillips' League of Ireland debut for Drogheda around COVID time, and Josh Honohan, obviously watched a lot of him, and you know, I thought he was very good in Europe last year, so I think it's fair enough he's in the discussion, in a position where Ireland don't have many fullbacks coming through. Unfortunately, he can play both positions. Josh Keeley, yeah, look, it's a product of like Mark Travers would have been in the squad in normal circumstances, but he's done well this year, Keeley, and he deserves a chance. I think, you know, John Joe Patrick Finn or John Patrick or however, I'm not sure what the best way to refer to him as. He's a little bit of the unknown. Like, Ireland are very short in midfielders, as people know. And obviously the nature of this squad, okay, Knight has been included, but Josh Cullen isn't in. Malumbi isn't in. Mark Sykes is injured. Alan Brown doesn't seem to be in favour. It's clearly a position that they're searching for something. Finn Azaz, obviously, I know he's a bit more of an attacking player, but again, he's not involved in this one. Rocco Vata as well. So, like, obviously you have a 24-man squad, and no disrespect to any of the players here, they're not necessarily in as they might be 36 to 40 maybe, or 30 to 35 at another time, but if you're playing 2 summer friendlies in June, it's actually very unusual now in international football that the Nations League has filled up most of these windows with competitive games. So it's really only every couple of years that you might have like a window like this where the matches don't really matter. So that is the time you can probably get experimental, even though there's a slight contradiction there in that Heimir has probably talked about wanting a settled team, and the counterpoint to the squad could be championship players or no championship players. Would you not use this window to see more of Finn Azaz, see more of whoever it might be, you know, and Rockavat or take a championship player of choice and work around their relationships. But I think I actually would come down on the side of what he's done, but I think there's obviously a counterpoint.
Yeah, we actually have Heimir's explanation for the not picking these championship players, and this was his rationale.
there's a disadvantage to announcing the squad early. 3 weeks is a long time in football, so a lot of things can change. So we take that into account, and we opted to go for 25 players. We plan to have a camp right after the championship finished in May, and play the championship players in that time, and then give them off for the June window. That kind of colours a little bit our squad that you have seen. This June window has been tough or tricky for Ireland in the past, and I would guess the reason is that after a long season like the championship is, playing 2 games every week, or you can call it 3 games every week, and a lot of matches in the end of season, players are tired, both physically and mentally, and after the season they switch off, and then just to keep fitness level for a month until 2 friendlies is tricky and tough. But I think also mentally, just to switch on, switch off is tough for them. So what we want now, most of all, is that these players take a good off season and come in flying in pre-season, and in September we will benefit from that rest. Another factor in this is as well that we expect to have no holiday next summer. We expect to come in straight from the season, in the pre-season, going to US in the World Cup. So no holiday next season. We can at least give them some extra holiday this season. And it goes the same with you guys.
Rousing words from Heimir.
He deadpanned that in at the end. It was just like, okay. Well, I mean, I'm definitely up for that. You know, I'm definitely up for Ireland being at a World Cup. It's the one box to tick for a lot of people, maybe my age, that want to go to watch Ireland at a World Cup.
Rationale, it makes sense. That the championship is a nutritional season. Your point though about seeing someone like Finn Azaz in particular, who, you know, I know we were derisively, myself and Conan, referred to as the Buzz Brothers a few weeks ago. But
accurately.
Well, I don't know about that. I would dispute that. But
it's going to be difficult at the end of the year when Rory's Augusta is overlooked as greatest sporting moment of the year is the Nations League playoff with Bulgaria. You know,
the step overs, not to relitigate it, but the step overs.
That first half in Bulgaria, man. Where were you for that? Never mind where you were for Augusta.
But missing Finn Azaz out and other players of that ilk, it's interesting. You kind of see both ways. How are you kind of coming down on it, or having listened to what he said?
No, I think it's the right thing to do. There is no doubt. I think Heimir's done his homework. He's spoken to people around the game. I don't know, has he spoken to Stephen Kenny at any point? I think there might have been, that. I think of that game in Armenia, which was grim, and Stephen Kenny, that they were relying a lot on Callum Robinson. I think it was Ogbenny at the time. And people who hadn't played in 5 weeks. It's an unusual one. Ireland is very reliant on the championship, and just the nature of the English football calendar is that the championship regular season finishes so early, and you have a 5-week gap effectively between the sort of May bank holiday weekend, when it sort of tends to finish up, and games in June. And when they've been meaningful games, there's no doubt it's been an issue, and different managers have tried to approach it in different ways. And that's the advantage of having players in Europe, like Troy Parrott. I know he's injured at the moment, but those players who are in leagues that are active up until the end of May, it seems. And I think if you have someone like Josh Cullen, who you think, the important thing to know here as well, and Heimir's conscious of this, that this is the weirdest World Cup campaign that Ireland have had. Now, this is going to become the new normal, but we haven't been here before, and that generally a World Cup campaign would play out from March to November, or previously it used to be from September to November of the following year. It'd be 14 months. So if someone gets a 2-month injury, well, you might miss 20% of the campaign. His point would be now that if someone picks up an injury in September and puts them out for 2 months, they're missing the entire World Cup campaign, because it's, well, the entire regular, hopefully Ireland are in the playoff at the end of it. I think that's probably the best case scenario. So if you have someone like Josh Cullen, who you think is going to be very important for you, and he's played almost every minute for Burnley up until May, and his only chance for rest and recuperation in his year is between now and presumably the second week of June or third week of June, when Burnley start to come back in, why then would you interrupt that break to put them in here for 4 or 5 days against Senegal and Luxembourg? And what happens then if in August, September he picks up a couple of injuries? Do you think, God, was that our fault? Now, I take your point. Someone like Finn Azaz, you'd like to see bit more of him and relationships build up. But equally, I mean, he's had a very busy season at Middlesbrough, and maybe Heimir may say otherwise, but I suspect that he possibly might have a fair idea now at this stage, or he should do at least, of the players that he's really going to need in the autumn. And yes, this is a chance for some of these players to break in, and hopefully, I think in certain positions, midfield, full-back, they're always going to be open to a sort of a bolter, to use sort of a Lions term almost, But I'd say he's a probably fair idea of knowing his hand now. So I think it's more important to have them ready for the autumn than needing to see them now. As much as sort of observers or fans, everyone wants to see the new shiny player you want to see more of. I do get that.
Does it kind of speak to him being quite, I suppose, a bit kind of comfortable, because he doesn't feel like, oh, I need all my players available, I need to get results against Senegal and Luxembourg.
That's a good point.
I have to, because there was times gone by an Ireland manager would need to scrap and claw for any win to just keep the fans or the media or whoever off their back. And he's obviously, like he's mentioned it there, I want them raring to go in September when this kind of sprint World Cup campaign starts. So it's interesting, he feels he has the, I suppose, the latitude or even the confidence to say, I don't need them. Yeah,
and I kind of wonder, I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that is a good point. Like, I wonder, in a world where Ireland have lost the playoff to Bulgaria, do you feel under more pressure to get a result? And that was definitely the thing with Stephen Kenny. He was constantly searching for the next result, and yeah, I do take that point. It ties in with Heimir generally. Like, he is quite confident in what he's doing himself, and he can own that decision. And I'd imagine one or two of those players are probably unhappy to be left out. They might be looking forward to I don't know. I can imagine, like, the likes of Jason Malumbi and people maybe who've maybe lost their place in the Ireland team, but have been around the squad, and they'll be thinking, God, that would have been a chance for me. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe deep down they're like, God, we're actually going to get a proper break for once, and he'll get the benefit of it later in the year. But I think in general terms, I think he knows the job he's been brought in to do. It's always been about 6 games later this year. Now, this is the thing. Ireland ended up in a 4-team group. He was quite happy to end up in that 4-team group, because the alternative world is that if Ireland were in a 5-team group, Ireland would be playing World Cup qualifiers in 2 weeks' time, as some nations will be, as Finland will be, who Ireland finished ahead of in the group last year. And I think in some respects you could say he's fortunate to have avoided playing big games in that window with all the question marks there would be over players in his squad, that this will maybe be quite a relaxed summer window. I can't imagine, barring, I don't know, a bad result in Luxembourg or something, like, and even then I'd imagine people would be a bit more like, okay,
we've seen that before.
Everyone knows what this year is about. He's going to be judged, no matter how good a job he does in the summer. Actually, he'll know, the mood of the nation towards the team will be dictated by Hungary on a Saturday in September and Armenia 3 days later.
One player who he was asked about as well was Evan Ferguson, who is included in the squad, and obviously he scored that goal against Bulgaria, and there was hope that might be a catalyst for him at club level. I think, if I'm right, he's only played 59 minutes across the 7 matches for West Ham since the last window, which, needless to say, they're not good numbers. Like, what was kind of the tone about what Heimir thinks of him, or what do you generally think his headspace is going to be like come this window? Yeah,
I think he's one that I don't know. I'm sure he's one he definitely wants these games. I'm saying he's living for them. And this is one where, like, Ireland are very invested. I talk about that 2-month, 3-month window in the autumn that's going to determine your year, your campaign, your 2 years. State the obvious, you need your best players to be in a good place then. So, Heimir has to be very invested in Evan being in the right frame of mind in the autumn, and he just needs something to smile about. Just needs a goal. Just needs something. And like, he did have that moment. Like, people could feel the energy in the stadium against Bulgaria, where there was probably a bit of negative energy towards Ferguson at times in that game. Then he gets the goal. It's like, oh yeah, that's what the fuss is about. And I think for him, I don't know what the plan will be. Like, who knows? Like, in terms of managing minutes and stuff. But like, he actually, I mean, he didn't start the first game, and that, like, Troy Parrott was ahead of him. But I think for me, you'd be getting Evan Ferguson on the pitch for those 180 minutes and just try and give him something to cling on. And even, look, big clubs now, they're not going to be doing their business on the basis of someone doing stuff in the June international window, right? They're not going to recruit on the basis of that. But still, a bit of positive energy around someone isn't a bad thing. Just send them off into summer in better form, even if it's with a view to come back into Brighton in July and maybe just getting off to a different. Like, he missed, like, the root of his problems. And there's a lot of issues you can talk about, but he did miss the entirety of pre-season last year with Brighton, and as a result, he was behind the 8 ball there the whole season. So, anyway, you
would
can
love
get him
to know as well, though, what's happening at West Ham at the moment. What's the training like? What talk is going on between Ferguson and Graham Potter as to why he hasn't featured at all? Because especially after that Bulgaria game, there was, as I said, there was hope that might give him a little bit of an in, but it clearly hasn't materialised.
Well, yeah, I did a piece about this recently. I think the problem with the West Ham loan situation was you signed someone on loan in January to deliver instant results. If Evan Ferguson is in a place where it looks like, God, this guy's a bit low at the moment, maybe he needs to get some minutes to get his confidence up, that's of no use to West Ham because he's not their player. They don't need to fatten the calf to sell him in the summer. That doesn't benefit them. So whatever about the relationship with Potter and Ferguson going back, and maybe there's a teacher-pupil element to that because he gave him his breakthrough, unless he was in a position to deliver instant results for Graham Potter, then he's not invested in him. If it's a 20-year-old player who's on your books, but then you are invested in giving him minutes but the nature of a loan arrangement is such, a January one, it's very transactional, like particularly transactional. And unfortunately, I sort of feared this when, like, I thought, like, and I feared this, I hold my hands up, I thought it was a good opportunity for him. I thought it would go well. It hasn't. Like, that's disappointing. But I did fear once he got to the stage where it wasn't going well, well, then he's of no use to West Ham then. They don't owe him anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, when he got hooked at half time after missing that sitter, I can't remember who it was against.
It was Wolves.
Yeah, Wolves.
Yeah.
That was the moment I think that his West Ham promise probably ended.
I think so. And also, I have this thing as well, and we can all have this in your life where I know people say, well, he was the one who gave him his debut, but also, like, Graham Potter brought Evan Ferguson around the country on the Brighton bench for a year. It was really De Zerbi that he had the really big breakthrough under. And you know, sometimes in life you can have a relationship, a dynamic with an employer or someone where you're the young lad in the office, you're easy to drop. And I kind of wonder, in Graham Potter's eyes, is Evan Ferguson easy to drop because it's Evan? We brought Evan along, as opposed to being that, maybe that more seasoned pro that, well, you don't want to upset him. I wonder, is there an element of that and that dynamic? And I thought taking him off at half time that game was like, that's a bit harsh.
Yeah.
You know? But who knows? We're not seeing how he's training every day and what the dynamic is every day, and there may be reasons for that.
Anything else in the squad before we move on?
Nothing in particular stands out. No, I mean, aside from the four lads who are called in, as I said, you know, John Patrick is an interesting one. Like, he's moved to Stade Reims in France. He hasn't necessarily been playing a huge amount, like in the last couple of weeks. So I mean, I think there is a tendency sometimes that these players outside the camp, that people want to come in, they're built up to be amazing, and you have to temper those expectations a little bit. But he's definitely one who's got an interesting pedigree, and I want to see how he gets on. Yeah, I think Josh Honohan is one who will probably get a move in the next 6 to 12 months. So that coffee between Bradley and Heimir obviously went well, because I was making some inquiries about that and, you know, how did it go, and obviously everyone has said it's gone well, but I was sort of trying to figure out there's a bit anything else to it, and I got comments along the lines of, well, if Josh Honohan's not in the squad, I'm not sure how well it went. So I'd imagine Bradley is given a strong pitch. I think with Josh, there's a feeling that athletically, you know, power in terms of he has all of that stuff. It's about, and Heimir was sort of saying, well, let's see now how he gets on training with better players. And I think that's going to be the test. But he's a real traditional Irish late bloomer. So we'll see if that opens a couple of doors. I don't want to say career change, because Heimir obviously got bothered by saying that before. But it probably it will increase his profile. I think people are expecting him to maybe move, if not this summer, definitely next winter.
I wonder where they met for that coffee. I would have fun to see sitting in a coffee shop, watch the two lads walk into.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, Heimir's getting around the place. He's doing all of that, you know. And we spoke briefly off air. Like, I think he's in a very fractured world of Irish football, where distrust is rampant and everyone wants to screw each other over in some shape or form. He's emerging with popularity, which is difficult. You know, it's difficult. He's definitely, like, that's a skill. I mean, sometimes that can sound patronising talking that way. That's not the case. I think that's actually a skill to be able to navigate that world and sort of remain on good terms with people who may be on different sides of arguments. I think I wouldn't underestimate it. It gives you a sense of, when he came in at first, Heimir, you heard that in the dressing room there was no doubt who was the manager, and I can see that. That isn't always by like shouting, it can be just more presence. And I think he has a good presence, definitely.
Yeah, but we'll hear more from him in about 3 weeks' time when that international window opens up. FAI story today that people weren't expecting. Hannah Dingley, the head of women's and girls football, is set to leave after just 1 year. I think she came in last May. You were right. You followed the story this afternoon. You understand she's handed in her notice last week, and confirmation of her exit is imminent. She took over the role that Eileen Gleeson vacated when she became the women's manager, and then there's potentially Eileen Gleeson going back into it because she's still on the FAI payroll. Like it's a kind of another one of those things that just comes out at you, and you're like, God, that's another person who's come in and is leaving quite quickly. Yeah,
no, this story is sort of started knocking around this morning, all right, and it does seem to be as we're speaking Wednesday afternoon now. So the vibe very much was that something has been prepared, maybe to confirm it. So we'll see. Maybe by the time people are listening to this, it might be out, but. A year in the job, as you say, and it's following on from Mark Canham's departure, and just a lot of change, sort of a constant state of flux in positions, executive positions, and probably handing another voice who came in from the English game. She's Welsh, but from the English game with Forest Green, and has come to Ireland, and looks set to leave without necessarily finishing the job that they were brought in to do. I think the public have had very limited interactions with her. There was presented an action plan a couple of months back in Mansion House, and that was probably the only time she was really out there. And I think she sort of memorably at that time uttered the line, "We have no money," but just like, you're not meant to say that part out loud. That's the thing that everyone knows. But in a broader presentation, but it's almost such a swift departure that it's actually very difficult to assess the legacy, because the nature of the job was about maybe setting out a plan for the years to come, and now she's gone. So unfortunately for her, and don't mean this in a negative way, but it's such a brief stint that it will be easily forgotten.
Yeah, one of those ones that you just see it and you're like, another
one gone. And a lot of changes, and expecting news on Mark Canham's interim replacement, maybe across the next week. I think his assistant Shane Robinson is probably, people are expecting that it might be him, but we'll see what happens. But if there's a lot going on, and I think a lot will happen with staffing generally in the FAI across the next year, and we'll see how roles are filled. Is it like for like, or redivision of sort of responsibilities? We'll see.
Another thing you were writing about, and this did pass me by, and again, it's kind of a bit time sensitive as well. Robbie Keane stands on the cusp of winning a double in Hungary as his management credentials grow. That was the piece you wrote this morning in the Irish Independent. His Ferencváros team are odds on probably to wrap up the league title. Yeah, 2 games to go, a 3-point lead with a vastly superior goal difference to Puskás Akademia. So that's looking quite likely. They're also in the Hungarian Cup final, which is actually this evening. With the time difference, it'll probably kick off. Was it like 6 p.m?
I think so. Yeah.
They're playing PAX, one of their rivals, and that. So possibly a double. But either way, it's interesting, because obviously when he was in Israel, Maccabi Tel Aviv got a lot of attention naturally, and then he went to Ferencváros, and that got a lot of attention at the start, and I kind of haven't really thought about it since, until I saw this piece today. It's very interesting, as you say, the management credentials growing piece of it. Like, what comes from this, do you think?
That's the thing. That's the great unknown. And a guy was over there in January for his first game, or his first home game, and it's a weird one. Ferencváros is a huge club, but the history of their managers, and this isn't to be disparaging about Robbie, what he might do this week. They are going to win the league. I think it would take a dramatic collapse to not, and we'll see, if they've won the double or not. But they are sort of expected to win the league. It's a bit of it will be 7 in a row. So it's sort of Celtic and Scotland, but without a Rangers level rival. Now, when he took over, they were second behind Puskás Akademia, which is basically a team based in a village. That's Viktor Orban's hometown, and all of a sudden, hey presto, they've got a nice stadium and a proper club. How did that happen? But he's not going to win maybe massive respect for just winning the league there. The big thing is getting into the Champions League qualifiers, see what happens in the summer and what he can do in Europe. He did quite well in Europe, but he inherited a European campaign when he went in. They'll have aspirations of getting a bit further along the line and maybe even getting into the group stage, the Champions League group stage. Where does it lead? I don't know. I mean, look, the whole piece when I was over in January, you can't get away from like the elephant in the room. It's not even that. It's just like his time in Israel. It was obviously, it remains incredibly divisive, and it's a very emotional thing, and that is always going to be there.
Do you think that does that damage his...
That's more of an Irish thing. More of an Irish thing. So I don't think anyone expects him to be if Heimir left tomorrow. I still don't think anyone would imagine at this moment in time they would ever come into that discussion. But I don't think that's going to have any impact on his standing elsewhere in the football world. And he's gone down a route that I have to say, like, leave all that stuff out of it. I quite like the football route he's gone down. I think it's probably some going to Ferencváros, like getting exposure to high level European games, it's going to give his CV a little bit of and there's a bit of longevity in that as well. Sometimes you can go into your first job in England and it could be over after 6 months and you might be done. But once you've proven you can work in a place and a couple of places for remain in employment for a number of years within football, that just does such a good thing for your CV as opposed to jumping here and there.
You have the reputation for someone who can move around like the world or Europe, managing in different countries. I feel like you always see these veteran managers who've been managing all over. Like Trapp was one of them.
There'll always be a gig. There'll always be a gig. And I think it's clever. I think you go into... you go into Plymouth or something, and it doesn't go well for 9 months. That can be you, like that can be it. So, and as I said, like I've been following it because I was over there. I definitely more interested in it. And I'm trying to follow it every week, and like they've been involved in a couple of mad games. Like at the weekend, they were seconds from disaster, and they scored an injury time winner, which pretty much has them sort of in control of their destiny in the league. But I'd imagine his next step would be. Try and have a really good European campaign with Ferencváros next year, and then probably go somewhere else in Europe, maybe America.
Not England.
I would be surprised if he jumped there that quickly. I would be a little bit surprised. Now, of course, if an amazing job came up, then that could change. But I think he's someone who would much rather be, I think, managing in European, like Europa League, even Conference League, whatever it might be, than in the middle of the Championship. Obviously, a Premier League job is a Premier League job. That's the thing.
America is interesting as well. Obviously, he played there for a long time.
Yeah.
Would have admirers, and then obviously the Israel element again wouldn't be as.
Oh, not an issue at all. No, bloody hell, they've rolled the red carpet down and say, no, like that is an avenue. I suppose the thing about the MLS managerial wise, it's. Is it firmly putting you on a particular ladder? Like I'm not entirely sure. I think Europe, you're at the sharp end of it. I think there's no doubt. Like he seems to have done a decent job there, but I'm sure he'll know, and his employers and everyone there, there'll be a lot of scrutiny on him in the summer. I mean, what you really want in the summer, Will, is that you want Shells to win their first European Champions League title, and I think then they'd be on the opposite side of the draw to Ferencváros, and you need Robbie Keane managing against Damien Duff in Europe, and I mean, we can just retire.
Oh yeah,
let the content sing for us.
That brings me nicely on to the man Damien Duff himself, who I was about to ask you about, because he was talking about his, I suppose, recent feud with Stephen Bradley, the war of words, however you want to paint it. And he was asked about, their meeting, I think next month, and what their relationship,
June 13th,
what their relationship might be like. And he says it has got absolutely out of control. It's a story for yous being the media. It looks like it is. When there is wonderful football games going on around the country, and this is getting airtime, I find it a little bit disappointing. There are wonderful reporters in this room, and you are writing about this nonsense. Was he looking at you when he said that with his fingers pointing?
He was, because I'd actually asked the question that led to it. I'm not suggesting I was being described as a wonderful reporter, but I did. It was at the end of his thing, and I was like, you can't let this pass without asking about it at least. And he took that line. I mean, look, that's like almost the moral high ground line, and I respect it. But obviously, like 5 days earlier, he did say something along the lines of, now that Stephen's been invited down to the Dáil, he thinks he's an expert in everything or something. So, I mean, He has got on board with it. I think he's probably right at this stage to sort of to leave it for now. But
It's 100% a story. I don't.
Yeah, no, it is.
The
Honest,
idea that this
he
is
knows
non.
it as well. He knows the story, and because earlier, I will say that earlier in that press conference, and it's sort of niche. It would have slipped under the radar, maybe just someone there, one or two people there. But like Kerr McEnroy was the player that started this by Duff saying he was the best player in the league, and Bradley says, well, I think Damien's getting carried away. He's getting a bit emotional. And then McEnroy scores the winner on Friday night against Pats in injury time or 90-minute goal. And Duff, earlier speaking about McEnroy, just said, well, you know, you have to be very careful what you say about Kerr in this league at the moment, with sort of a smile. So look, you know, he gets it.
Yeah, well, it's great having these, you know, big box office managerial figures. It just adds an extra layer because the football has been better, the atmosphere and the grounds have been better, but having those kind of focal points as well.
And you need it. Yeah, it's a competitive sporting market. You've probably spoken about it lots in here. It's maybe the busiest sporting months of the year are now, with just with the championship like coming forward a bit, and then other sports coming to the climax of their seasons or whatever, and like, you know, football in England and Europe coming to the end of the season. So when you have these guys can get the league stuff onto the back pages or onto the front pages of websites and stuff, yeah, like you can't put a price on that. Yeah,
Stephen Kenny did a good job of that as well.
Yeah, he had a bit yesterday. Yeah,
so he was referring to two incidents. One against Shelburne where Chris Forrester was down with an injury. Play wasn't stopped. Shelburne went on to score, and then he also referred to a Pats Bows game recently where Pats put the ball out of play. Bows then actually played on and didn't give the ball back, and he said, "There's no rules anymore. There's no sportsmanship at all. It doesn't exist now. It's a big change for me coming in. Sportsmanship is a thing of the past. The previous game against Bohemians, they didn't give the ball back. This one against Shells, we play on. The referee doesn't stop it because it's not a head injury, but obviously in pain. He's in pain. He's in agony on the ground." That's the way it is. The rules are you don't have to kick the ball out unless it's a head injury. Sportsmanship is dead and gone. It's with O'Leary in the grave.
When I saw that first, because Aidan Fitzmaurice did that for us, I was like, did he actually say that? Or as someone just like Aidan put that language on it himself?
I thought the same thing. I was like, no, that's obviously a headline.
His intros ended up in the headline.
Yeah.
I was like, this has been a mistake. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh no.
He actually said it.
This.
I had the exact same thought.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, firstly, I will say, I thought he was going to kick off about this last Friday after the game, and I went up to him and obviously asked him, and he was quite didn't go down that road. Like, he's sort of like, well, you know, maybe not ideal, or that's paraphrasing it, but obviously he's had a couple of days to think about
watch
it.
It back probably.
And he's like, actually, this was bad. The one against Bows now, I will say there's a couple of different versions of that story, because one opinion is that when Pats kicked the ball out of the play, it was because their goalkeeper was quote unquote injured, and this has become a big thing in the league the last year or two, and I think in football generally, tactical stoppages for goalkeepers to be treated. Obviously a goalkeeper can't go off the pitch, so it's a chance for the whole squad to come over and have a debrief, and these have become a massive talking point. And I think on the basis of that, I think that's why Bowes didn't give the ball back, and that's what led to the sideline stuff. But in general, I would say Stephen Kenny, like, he hasn't got involved in a lot of the verbal stuff since he's come back to the league, and I have a few theories, but I'm not sure if he wants to be fully out there with that until he does something. And I believe that if he does win something, it could be quite entertaining to see how he responds to it.
Well,
I think he's hanging back a little bit.
Was he that particularly verbal in like the Dundalk era? Like,
a bit different. I think he would have been more screaming from the rooftops about maybe my player should be in the Ireland squad, and he's done a little bit of that since. But I think there is an element of, look, he has most recently been the Irish manager. He's not probably going to come out and hammer the FAI like Duff and Bradley have. Like the Mark Canham stuff for him, like, you know, Stephen Kenny speaking about Mark Canham is difficult because they worked together, and then Canham presided over a review, and probably looks like sour grapes if you start. So I think he's hung back from some of it, but I mean, the bigger picture for them, if you're people for St. Pat's, like, the results have been a little bit disappointing, and he's obviously come out to say this. We'll see if there's going to be a follow on from it, but he's under a little bit of pressure to get some results there now. But as a general thing about sportsmanship and stuff, like, I mean, look, like, and I say this as a compliment, like Stephen's teams, like at Dundalk, they were good at playing the game and managing the referee, and that's, I think every manager wants their team to do that, by the way. That's not a negative thing. So I'm not sure about the league, this time where the league was a virtuous place where this stuff didn't happen. I'm not sure if I quite recall that time.
Well, just before we wrap up, a reminder that our football coverage is brought to you by Sky Sports, where you can experience more exclusive live sport than anywhere else, including at least 215 live Premier League games next season. There's also every golf major, including the PGA Championship this weekend, every F1 race, Premier League darts, the 2025 Lions Tour, and much more. Watch Sky Sports on Sky, or you can stream it now with Now. Or you can stream it with Now. One last story as well before League of Ireland story before we wrap up. Lys Mousset, you wanted to.
Yeah.
He scored his first goal for Bohs in the 1-0 win away to Sligo last Saturday. Leaves him only 2 points off the top and fourth, so they haven't needed his goals to kind of ascend the table. But it's funny, another guy, kind of like the Robbie Keane thing earlier. I was finding it very entertaining when it was announced he signed, and I kind of forgot about it for a while until that goal, and you had a few bits to say to me before we kicked off.
Like the Moose has become this side story to the season, and again, like there's almost an ironic element to him, like when he was signed, and some of the Bohs fans getting caught up in it. These sort of Moose emojis they've been sending around, and like I can tell you, like even members of staff and people at the club were sending this, but no one knew what they were going to get. Like this is a guy who, you have these former Premier League players, and sometimes the former Premier League players are like 35. And they played in it maybe 12 years ago. Like Lys Mousset is only still in his 20s. He moved for 13 million quid in 2019. That season coming up to COVID, like he scored against Manchester United, against Arsenal, I think Everton. I think he got 6 goals that year. And within like a very short space of time, his career just went rapidly downhill. To a point where he hadn't played football for a year. He was at a club in Germany where he had issues with timekeeping, even though he lived next to the training ground. According to, that's what the club said. So he barely didn't even play for them. And then he was out at a game, and you're like, how have you pitched up here in Ireland? I think living in a hotel somewhere in the north side of Dublin, playing for Bohs, and like definitely struggling for physical condition. But Bohs just had to take a chance because he was a free agent. And the thing about it is, and probably why maybe there's a bit more warmth towards him, is that for all that stuff, his CV, you go, what's the story with this guy? It was John Egan and Enda Stevens had a big part in him signing. John Egan in particular, like, who would be regarded as quite a solid fella and like vouch for his character. And generally you would look at someone with that CV and go, oh, this guy must be complete bad news. But even like when he had signed for Bohs, all the Sheffield United fans were coming on to comment on the post, and they're not saying, oh, you got that, you know.
There's moose emojis, constant moose emojis.
They're like, oh, what a player. They're all like, what a player. I can't believe, you know, what happened. And their feeling would be, and look, he's not here to defend himself, that whatever, maybe some of his lifestyle wouldn't have been terrific, you know, in terms of maybe somehow he looked after himself. But there was no one saying, geez, he's rubbish. That's the mad thing. Like within 5-6 years ago, he was playing at the best league in the world.
£10 million.
Yeah.
Sheffield United paid for him.
So like, you watch the goals, he could move as well, and now you're looking at him going,
how has he been playing? So this is his first goal, obviously, so how has he been playing up to now?
Well, he was off the bench. He started in the Aviva the opening day, did well, made the goal, but looked, you know, unfit. Since then, he's pretty much had sub cameos, and he missed an open goal against Sligo Rovers at home. I saw him last week against Waterford. He come on and he's just sniffing round. Didn't really do a huge amount, to be honest. And you're thinking, God, is this going to be one of those where in the summer it's like mutual consent and he's gone? But then he just has this moment.
Good goal as well.
All over the top.
Yeah.
It's like the light clicked on and he just shoves these players out of the way, bashes it in, and then like has his interview with him afterwards, almost bemused, because even though he's been doing badly, the fans have sort of still been singing in his name. And I think the Bohs fans they took the Talking Head song, and it was like Psycho Killer Lys Mousset was like the song they had and then they changed that and started the Sligo Killer Lys Mousset, and it's just been a great humour about the whole thing. But now actually he's scored a goal and he's done something of note. But it
feels all very good natured.
It is sort of quite like wholesome in some respects, even though I'm sure within him, and he was interviewed, I wouldn't say he doesn't seem to have like terrific English on the basis of, say, the interviews. I don't know. Like, I'm sure like there must be in his story some sense of like bemusement over his career path, because honestly, like, you know,
what age do you know?
He's I think he's 29 now, yeah. But he played for Bournemouth in the Premier League before as well. Didn't score a huge amount of goals there, but like this is someone who in his late teens, early 20s was doing it at the highest level. And I mean, football has a massive attrition rate. Like, you know, it's a ruthless industry that churns people out, and it's just so surreal that he's ended up here. And it would be a sort of a great story. I mean, a couple of weeks back, there was a sort of suggestion during the international break in March that he'd gone off to just to do some treatment to try and come back in better physical condition. It was all a bit grey because staff and people were saying, no, honestly, if he gets it right, he'll be the best player in the league. He hasn't looked like it, but who knows? Maybe Saturday could be the moment.
That goal could be the catalyst.
Yeah.
I think we hit on pretty much everything. There was a lot to get to. Dan, thanks so much for joining me.
No worries.